I thank you all for being here this evening. We're going to walk you through this exhibition and the other two exhibitions that form part of this constellation. But before that happens, I'm going to call upon Cymroza Godrej to say a few words.
Thank you very much, and do excuse me for removing this lovely mask, which I know matches my sari, which I wore about 25 years ago, and it's up on display in black and white. And I wore it slightly differently, that's why I'm hanging on to my pallav. So thank you so much, Ranjit. I don't need to introduce Ranjit Hoskote, who is a leading cultural theorist in our city. I've known Ranjit and his charming intellectual wife, also a cultural theorist, Nancy Adajania, who is curating another show of Cymrozas at Chatterjee and Lal. And of course, Ranjit curated the show at Pandol's. I have to say this because when we were discussing this exhibition, I had a completely different vision of how we were going to present this collection. It's a large, rather cumbersome collection, and my only brief was, please don't ask me what you want to do. Please do what you want to do, and treat me like a fly on the wall. And I can honestly say, other than one thing, I have not interfered. I think for a curator, that's very, very important. A collector should not influence the thinking, the critical thinking of a curator. And those of you who've seen the Pandol show will marvel at how this gentleman, the scholar, has brought it all together and pulled all the threads of not my collection, but of what Indian art stands for over the last 5 decades. Not everything about Indian art, but some strands of Indian art. So thank you very, very much, Ranjit. It's been a privilege to have you curate Cymroza Chronicles, which we're all here to listen to this evening. We've had 2 wonderful talks, one at Pandol and the other at Chatterjee and Lal. Everything goes on YouTube, and you can see it. It'll be on all the gallery sites, and it's going to be, I think, permanently, if my archivist will help me out. And I'd like to introduce Vrunda Pathare, who heads the Godrej archives, because frankly, I didn't know what to do. Collecting is such a joy, but it can be very, very painful when you look at the collection and say, where do we go from here? Firstly, you have to maintain the collection. You have to keep it in the pristine condition from the time you received it from the artist's studio or from an exhibition. That's the least respectful thing for a collector to do. And I have heard collectors over the years, oh, I had an Eli Setna, for example. I don't know where it is today. So I said, please look for it, find it, and we can help you take it ahead from there. So I'm fortunate that I could leave this to Vrunda. I would have had to leave it to her sooner or later, so I might as well do it while I'm still able to think and stand and have my faculties around me and guide them if they need any help with small or large suggestions. So today is really a conversation between Ranjit and then followed by Vrunda. And I would like to thank Dadiba and Dadiba and Kaushik couldn't come today because yesterday on the spur of the moment, I'm messaging Ranjit and saying, where are you? Where are you? They're saying this show has to be extended by a day. And are you ready to, as curator? I need your permission. And of course, I walked into Pandol simultaneously, waiting for this man to message me back. I said, God, you're here. And we took an impromptu decision. 3 minutes later, there was a request from Chatterjee and Lal, and Mortimer Chatterjee and Tara Lal are here today, who are hosting the Nelly Setna show at CNL. And there was a request, we want to carry on till the end of October. So we said, okay, the two galleries, one in Chatterjee and Lal and Cymroza, will stay open till the end of October. And there are lots of events online, not like this anymore. We've taken a lot of risks by having these 3 walkthroughs of the exhibition, and I think we all need to be very careful from what one reads in the papers again. So thank you very, very much. Mort, Tara, in absentia, Pandols, Dadiba and Khorshed, Nancy, thank you very, very much. And the entire team. He will talk to you about our group, the Collegium, which is a nice way to refer to all of us. And maybe he might throw a few ideas at me about the future. There's one person who's here with me today who was with me 50 years ago, and I don't know why he's hiding, but I know he's here. Mr. Cyrus Shroff, will you please raise your hand? Thank you. He was a young boy. Our parents are no more. We think of them very fondly, and for someone like me on a daily basis, if it wasn't for my mother holding my hand and saying, but do it, what you want to do it now that you've got an opportunity. Why are you wasting your time? Move ahead. And I can hear her in my ears right now, and I think a lot of people standing here today can hear their parents' voices in their ears. So move ahead, make the most of this beautiful life that our parents have given us. So Cyrus was a young 14-year-old, and gives the difference between his age and my age. We're 8 years apart, and I'm so happy that he's here with me today. So enough of my chitter-chatter, and I hand you over to Ranjit. But before I do that, thank you very, very much.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much. Thank you. Where does one begin after that? Firoza, it's just been such a deeply moving account. And that's been the tenor of this entire initiative, actually. It was founded in these deeply moving experiences of thinking back over 50 years, thinking of a city institution, thinking of the various avatars that this gallery has played, and how to make sense of it all was the question when we had this mandate of celebrating what I believe a younger generation no longer even knows this phrase, the Golden Jubilee, the 50th anniversary of the founding of Cymroza. So what we thought we would do, and really I have to acknowledge with great joy the fact that this curatorial model was sustained by a collegium. There's, Firoza, you were a member of the collegium, so that has to be acknowledged first. Then there's Nancy and I who were curating individual exhibitions, Mortimer Chatterjee and Tara Lal, and Eve Lomel, our producer, who is in Barcelona as we speak, and Vrunda Pathare as our archivist colleague on this journey, rippling out to include absolutely incredible colleagues, some of whom are here, such as Ruby Marju, Sharok Marolia, and Sneha Chandorkar at Godrej, as well as our production and exhibition team. Anshul Saxena is here today, so I do want to As Kabir said, this body has many owners, so this project has been sustained by many, many imaginations and forms of effort. So what we thought we would do really is to work along three axes for this project. One would be this exhibition, not that we knew exactly how it would turn out when we started, but we wanted it to be an archival exhibition that took account of what the gallery had achieved, why it was founded, and especially the early years, which had been a little lost to sight. So that was one, the history of the gallery, conceived in archival terms. The second axis we wanted to explore was along the Jamshid and Firoza Godrej collection, to see its points of convergence with what the gallery did and points of divergence as well. And the third exhibition was one of the many artists that Firoza has championed over these years, someone who was unjustly eclipsed, lost to sight, part of the folklore of a certain generation, but otherwise erased from the record. And that's Nancy's exhibition, which is a retrospective of Nelly Setna. And in many ways for us, these were also deeply personal journeys. Over the years, we've been part of the Cymroza narrative in different ways at different milestones. We've worked together on an exhibition called No Parsis an Island at the National Gallery of Modern Art some years ago. So we were also picking up on some of these threads during this project. So I'm going to focus on this now. And when we began, we were wondering whether to make it a timeline-based chronological inquiry or whether to really focus on what the gallery had contributed to the life of the cultural life of the city and to the larger history of Indian art. And there were a number of things that may have been lost to sight, meanwhile, for all kinds of reasons. See, there's now a certain nostalgia about the late 40s and early 50s. We're all thinking back to Mulk Raj Anand at Marg, for instance, to Chetna, to many of the institutions and platforms of that period. Then there's a certain understanding of the moment of 1963, when both Pandol and Chemold opened as the city's more or less first professional galleries. Then there's suddenly a fast forward to the late 90s, early 2000s, and the rise of the professional galleries. What Cymroza's contribution was, and its stellar contribution, was actually the transition, the midpoint between the earlier and the later phases of this history that I've sketched out. So when Firoza, at the age of 23, founded this gallery, it took up the histories of what the Bulabai Institute had meant, for instance. I'm going to say up the road or down the road, however you want to characterize it. And how it wasn't just a gallery in terms of exhibiting and selling work, but it actually was a cultural platform. And it began, and its mandate, apparently, as we learned from the archive, and I'm going to invite Vrunda to speak after me on that subject, it began by branding itself, as we would say today, as a gallery for young people. And I've known this from having spoken to Firoza over the years, but it's oral history, it's folklore. How do we ground it in the substance of evidentiary documents, which is where you will come in, Vrunda, just after I wrap this up. What we were able to achieve through this is really to bring back the people who were involved, people who've been forgotten today. For instance, the High Youth Club, a group of journalists and activists, they're also playing right behind me. The kinds of people who performed here. I mean, this was a forum for concerts of Hindustani classical music, of Carnatic music, of folk and rock. My all-time favorite, I can't stop talking about it, Rohinton Mistry, the very straight-laced novelist of today, was once Ronnie Mistry, the folk rock musician, and he's up there. To name but one, there's also Devika and Malvika Rajbans Khanna then. And a number of other people were involved with this. If you want to take to this a certain sort of political optic, it's interesting that there was a certain, if you will, liberal, centrist kind of formation here. But even there you find, and if you look closely, you'll find the late Pradeep Guha, for instance, in these pictures. You'll find Aspi Mistry. These were people who were on the left, and there are people here who know that history and were part of it, Mariam, Naren. So as I looked at these pictures and I looked at what Vrunda was discovering in the archive, I just thought to myself, what we know of that period now also through Nancy Adijania's book on Navjot is the saliency of the left formations like Proyum. Here, there's a different but related picture. Then as now, Cymroza, it seems that your instincts were always to be liberal, to be inclusive of a spectrum of views. And that's been the DNA of this gallery. And that's what we wanted to bear witness to here. Starting with this, then moving on to the various art forms, genres, media that Cymroza has always supported. At a time when no one took printmaking very seriously, she went out, collaborated with the Zal Praxis Foundation, and there were two processes leading up to the Zal Praxis portfolios in 90 and 92. So that's one of the key features here. There was always on Cymroza's part, and therefore Cymroza's, a great interest in ceramics. At the Pandol show and here, we were able to really demonstrate the range and intensity of that preoccupation. There were different lineages of the ceramicist's art that you see in your collection and what the gallery did, whether it was Devi Prasad, for instance, or Ray Mika, or Gurcharan Singh, those three lineages, younger practitioners like Madhavi Subramaniam and Christine Michael, people like Primula Pandit, who are now falling off the radar. It's also been, for all of us involved, an intense exercise in retrieving a collective memory. And this is what we've tried to share here, also through the form of ephemera, if you will. So photographs, posters, correspondence, invitation cards, things that may well have, and would have if you hadn't rescued them. They would probably have been left in oblivion. So also then what we've been characterizing as subaltern art, which comes out of the dialogues and collaborations, again, that Cymroza has always invested herself in, with the Crafts Museum, with the Sanskriti Tribal Art Museum in Hazaribagh, seeking out and forming these connections. So that's another aspect of gallery practice that really comes across here. How to be part of this larger national narrative, how to be truly representative of diverse forms of making. And I'll leave you to imagine and to view the rest of it. But this wall is dear to us also because it demonstrates some of those friendships, those collegialities, those dialogues. So I'm going to end my part of this by saying that, in a sense, this exhibition relied on a proto-archive, because that's what it is. But it's also an engine that is now encouraging us to actually develop this into an archive. And I'm going to end with this thought, which I hope you'll respond to, Vrunda, because the Godrej archives really represents a certain understanding of corporate history. Now, how does this quest now fit into that? And what does that tell us about how corporate archives can be expanded beyond the hardcore of what a corporation does to also its cultural investments and engagements, its social responsibility? How does all that reflect in the archive, in this archive, and is that an example for other such archives? And I'm going to turn this over now to you.
Thank you, Ranjit, and thank you, Dr. Cymroza Godrej, for giving us this opportunity, because we were really excited when we were told that this collection is going to come to Godrej Archives. But I'm also feeling a bit overwhelmed, and that was, I think, the feeling I was going through for like last 2-3 months, because this collection was quite new to us. And, actually means speaking after these two stalwarts who had actually experienced this journey is actually quite stressful for me right now, because, what we were annotating in Excel sheets, the names that we were coming across, they had actually, interacted with them. They had actually, curated with them. So it's quite an interesting, and I think the oral histories with you both are still pending for me. So actually, I would say that this exhibition, in a way, is a beginning, because this was, the collection that we are also quite new to that, and we are still waiting for more and more to come. And here, I would also like to thank the team at Godrej Bhavan, Mr. Maju, Mr. Marolia, Yashraj, Sneha, and also my team at Godrej Archives, because Mr. Maju would call me and tell me, that there are a few more boxes that Yashraj has found. And then we would like, again go to the Godrej Bhavan and see what has, been discovered. And then again, Yashraj would go through few cupboards and again we will receive a call. So this was actually quite an exciting, but also like, when I was told that the timelines are like 2-3 months, we have to put up the exhibition, I was a little scared because we had really no clue how we are going to make sense of all that material. And I should thank Yashraj for like listing out the basic things. And then I could actually make sense on the Excel. We love Excel, by the way, the archivist. I think Ranjit must have been like, we were like, have burdened him with lots of Excels and made him select lots of things from that. But yes, but it was quite a rewarding experience. And when we were actually going through the collection, we thought that Cymroza was an institution, as Ranjit mentioned, was quite a locus of like, new ideas, new possibilities. And I think it was quite reflecting, again, the whole national narrative that was being, I think, unfolded at that point in time. And this also reminded me of my journey as an archivist at TIFR Archives, because even TIFR, being a science institute in advanced sciences, they also have an amazing art collection. So when Indira Chaudhary was setting up the archives and I was assisting her and annotating their collection and the Bhabha papers, these references to art kept popping up. I think Mortimer has done an excellent work on that. Yeah. So actually that the whole Cymroza experience reminded me of the TIFR experience, because I would also like to talk about a little bit of that collection as well, because I will be talking about how archiving the art and all these institutions are really very important, because these institutions were talking to each other, in say 40s and 50s. And there was a kind of a collaboration that even I think it continues even today after 50 years of Cymroza, that 3 galleries are, coming together and doing something. So this whole culture of collaboration was, I think, getting reflected in, throughout, like after 1947, post-independence. And I think that's what also was there present at TIFR because of course, the visionary Dr. Homi Bhabha. And I was actually really like, perplexed when I came across one interesting letter even there, where, Bhabha was actually writing to Maulana Azad. And this was regarding one ambitious exhibition on Indian art that was being planned in 1947. And there was one Magda Nachman, okay, the artist, the Jewish artist, yeah. So she was actually rejected by the selection committee for that exhibition. And then Bhabha is writing to Maulana Azad, who was the Minister of Education then, that, why this has been done. We need to like think about what exactly is an Indian art, who is an Indian, because like many Jewish artists like Walter Langhammer, or even the art critic Rudi von Leyden, even Magda had actually come, actually they were exiled from Europe and after World War, and they had like settled over here, and then Bhabha also like became friends with them. So that whole cultural exchange started, and he was a painter himself and interested in art. So that whole conversation started, and he's arguing in that letter that, we need to, for the new India, we have to think about that how the, all these forms of art has to like freely flow in new India. And that's what he's questioning. He's questioning even what is an Indian art, or what is, and I think these discussions are even today very much relevant, I think, for us as a country as well. So I saw that, that this whole debate over the art and these conversations were making it more exciting. And, it wasn't then just the Institute of Advanced Sciences. It was quite an institute which was trying to have these kind of dialogues, these kind of conversations with different artists, and that's what I think even in Cymroza I had seen, like collaboration is actually the key to what they were doing. And the other thing that I actually came across, there was another letter in Bhabha papers, which was, he wrote to Bernal, who was a crystallographer, if I remember correctly. So he is a father of modern biology also, one of the founders of modern biology. And he actually, Bhabha was reminding him that, in this last letter, you had actually spoke about Picasso, who could be persuaded to do a mural at TIFR. And so that's the letter is all about. And of course, that didn't happen. Picasso didn't do the mural, but Hussein did. And he actually, Bhabha contacted 10 emerging artists, which included actually Heber, Yamini Roy. And these were, of course, termed as emerging artist in that letter. And there are like wonderful responses came, and then Indira actually interviewed Hussein later telephonically, where he says that, I never thought that I would be selected, so I did it really very half-heartedly, and I sent it to TIFR. And that got selected because he thought that, there are like, a lot of his contemporary artists were like much deserving and he won't get it. But he got it, and then he actually took 2 years to complete that mural. And Indira also asked him about that, and he said, actually, I like the space. That whole TIFR atmosphere, they gave me a cabin, there was a nameplate of mine on the door. And, along with the scientist, I could have conversations. And that, I think, when I read that, I was like, really, that triggered me in imagining that how that space must have been, where artists are just coming in. There were photographs of Ara taking workshops with kids at TIFR. So I think this is something which I also found at Cymroza, which is, I think a decade later in 71 when Cymroza started. And even like here, if you can see these newspapers later on, you can actually check, if, I think Ranjit mentioned that, Cymroza's logo you will see, and they've, there is something written like Young People's Gallery. So I think this was quite an amazing thing to see in that newspaper, that it was, and a lot of newspaper articles later on also said that this is where the conversations between youngsters are happening. And it wasn't just for the art, I think galleries are now more than just displaying art. It is more about conversations, cross-pollination of ideas. And that you can see actually here, he had already pointed out that photographs wall, where you can actually see Nissim Ezekiel. There were like poetry recitals, there were jazz, there was even I think psychedelic, there was Hindustani classical. Here you will see a few letter and the correspondence with Zakir Hussain, who performed in 70s at Cymroza. So this is an interesting atmosphere that was being built, which is reflective of what national leadership was imagining for modern India. These were actually the modern sensibilities that were being reflected, maybe at TIFR or maybe at Cymroza. And I think that's something which really made me interested in this collection. Because even I think, and this also brings me to a question, that even archives are not a closed box, which is actually imagined to be. Like, we usually like look at that box, which has all the files and the photographs. But I think those walls are now, I think, breaking. And, even like these galleries, even archives have to now communicate and create these spaces and build these bridges with their audience, where just like these galleries actually made the audience also participate. And that actually we realized when the preview was happening at Cymroza. And we were interacting with people who have been associated or who were like seen in this picture. And they had a lot of stories and memories to share. I think, that's what I think make the history more interesting, because it is not just the founder's story, but it is also of all those people who have made this possible, who have interacted with these kind of spaces, may it be the conversations between public and the exhibitions, or may it be between the artist and the gallerist. I think these conversations, I think, are needed to be recorded. And therefore, I think every gallery must have their own archives. I know galleries have lot of things to do, but I think it's really a time that they tell their own story, they recollect their own memories and narratives. And I think that's, I think, what is really needed, that from the inside, this narrative should be, I think, built. Because, even the art process is quite an exciting thing, understanding the artist, because we interviewed Krishan Khanna just for 30 minutes, but it was really amazing to like just hear him, talk about how he came after the partition over here. He was working in the bank, and then how he actually persuaded his heart. He wasn't the trained artist. But these experiences, and even he spoke about how the gallery and the artist relationship should be. And, he actually spoke about Cymroza of being like an open and inclusive space that Ranjit mentioned. And he also said that, it is, so they actually knew what is to be done with the artworks that we, were wanted to present. They understood the artist is what he said. So these are, I think, the conversations and the memories I think we must document, because creating an art is a process, and that process needs to be documented. And I think galleries can actually, interact with their own artists and have this kind of a collection being created. I think Jahangir Nicholson now has a little bit of archives. And there is, of course, there is NCPA we have for the performing arts. So there are a lot of archives, like even Alkazi, he is here as well. But even that Bhulabhai Institute, I recently actually heard Vijaya Mehta's interview somewhere, and she was also saying that Bhulabhai Institute, she mentioned that, and she said that, Alkazi was doing theater, she was part of it, Gaitonde would come and do the sets. So this is the kind of interaction which was quite mind-boggling, and I think that's why these institutions, archives should come up and they should start talking to each other, because that's what I think is needed, and that's what is visible over here as well. And there are like even Cymroza, I think, came across as a gallery which was trying to do a disruptive kind of a reinventing the meaning of the galleries then. And I think, because I think being young, I think itself is quite a fun, and questioning the ideas, disrupting it, reinventing the meaning. And I think that's exactly what even archives try and do, and the curator as well. So I was also like trying to look at when, Ranjit used to talk about all these photographs, and, I was trying to memorize as much as possible, but that has not the case. But even I started looking at the role of curator and the archivist, how it is like, because even curator is actually selecting, trying to connect the dots between the things. And that's what even archivists should now, I think, come out of their, what you can say, comfortable zones, because archivists really love being in the archives, surrounded by the records and the racks. But I think they should also start talking to their documents. Of course, that we do at the annotation part when we do that. But I think, reinventing the meaning, and even archives as the galleries should, I think, now focus on how to create knowledge rather than just, recording it or just, describing it. I think there is much more to be done, even by the galleries and the archives, and create these kind of spaces where each and everything, everyone can talk to each other and try and find the different narratives, multiple perspectives, because I think that's what we need to break the monopoly of the truth that we talk about when we discuss archives, because, we have the power in a way to decide what the future will remember. And I think that's a huge responsibility. And if we can create these multiple narratives of different institutions, I think this is going to be a fantastic journey. And that's what we are doing at Godrej as well, that we are not restricting ourselves to products and the processes, but also these interactions that different spaces have. So engineers, designers talking to each other, even the customers, dealers, their different perspectives. So I think archiving is much more than just that box that creates, controls the content, but it is more about interaction, I think. So this is how the journey has begun now, and I think we will look out for more and more to just fill in the narrative. Thank you.
Thank you, Vrunda. Thank you, Ranjit. And thank you for the collegium. I would also like to offer my sincere thanks to all those working here at Cymroza for the last 50 years. Your strong support has meant a lot to me. There are two special people I would also like to thank, my Raika and my Navroz. Navroz has really been interested in the collection, and in the last few years he's also built a small collection of his own, which you must have seen or can see tomorrow at Pandol. Thank you, Navroz, for all those little hints and all those little corrections that you were making with me as we went along to celebrate Cymroza at 50. There's one more person who's been by my side for the last 45 years on this journey. Jamshid, thank you very, very much for your strong, silent support. You are really the anchor in my life and have anchored me to my passions and supported me in them as well. Thank you for being who you are, and thank you for making all this possible in my life.
Well, thank you so much, Vrunda and Firoza. And what happens next?
I think you all have thrown a lot of food for thought, many challenges for everyone here. You all are all going to be recorded from what I gather from Vrinda's presentation this evening. But thank you so very, very much. I really feel it's a large family atmosphere here this evening. Older members of the family, younger members of the family. I won't call us, I will never call anybody an octogenarian. And I feel very young and I see everybody smiling around me. So please, as I said, pick up a cup of tea, carry on with your conversations, look at the images, come back again whenever you like. There's been a bit of confusion on when are we open, when are we closed. So we are open Monday to Saturday from I think 11 to 7. And Chatterjee and Lal is open Tuesday to Saturday. They're closed Saturdays, Sunday and Monday. And both these shows will be running. We have talks and discussions with other partners like Avid, Asad Lalji is here, like the Asia Society, and with the Museum Society of Bombay. So we'll be sending you invitations and do join the Zoom links. And we look forward to seeing you safe and sound. We've had quite a fortnight of meeting and greeting and going out with masks, and I get worried sometimes. So thank you so much for venturing out this evening. Enjoy the evening and stay safe and stay well, all of you and your families. God bless. Thank you.